Hello, and welcome to yet another installment of our adventures through SPSS, looking at various different data sets that in prior versions we have created. We just finished an exciting adventure related to merging. And now what we're going to do is to take a little bit of time to delve into the process of looking at our data. And as we switch to looking at the data, we're going to get a bit more involved in the syntax file. I know that I've talked about the syntax file in the past and a couple of other versions of this demos. This time we're going to spend a bit more time getting into it. Before we do that, I want to start by saying the reason why we're going to spend some time on syntax files is while this can be a pain in the backside when you're initially getting started, by generating syntax files, you are actually teaching yourself the most effective and efficient way of using SPSS in the long term. And the reason for that has to do with the fact that in the point and click features that we've been doing up to this point, for the most part, these are fantastic features of SPSS that actually make it quite user-friendly. I'm sure that some of you may completely and utterly disagree with that statement, but generally speaking, especially relative to other data file statistical software programs, and when I say that I'm looking at USAS, compared to other statistical software programs, the point-and-click features built into SPSS make it incredibly accessible for new users. However, the problem with the point-and-click feature is the fact, and we've seen this already a couple times, is when you go through and you try to do something, if ever you want to do the same thing again, you have to repeat each and every step again and again and again. And in this respect, it is an extremely effective way to get something done, but an extremely inefficient way to get it done quickly again, and again. In other words, to repeat the process. And when it comes to statistics, there is a lot of repeating, whether it be developing a research paper that you code and recode and recode and recode multiple times over, or if it's in a peer-reviewed journal article where you run data for an analysis, you produce your results, you type them up, you submit them for publication, you get comments back from a reviewer somewhere between 6 and 8 years later. And so when you get when you get review comments back further down the road, you oftentimes will return to your data. And if everything that you did in your data had been done point and click, there is no record of what was actually done. In addition to that, you will need to repeat those steps. Let's say one of the comments is to do something different in your analysis. You'd have to repeat all of those steps one by one by one. With the syntax file, what you're able to do is go through and type up what it is you want SPSS to do, and then while it takes a bit more time the first time you're going through, each and every time you return, everything will still be there. And while, yes, you'll have to rerun it, you will not have to re-enter it, and that's where the syntax file becomes very efficient. And so we're going to start by introducing the syntax file as a way of opening up data. Up until this point, when we were talking about data that's already saved in SPSS format, what we've typically talked about is simply finding your data set and double-clicking on it. And so we see a couple data sets here, but the one I'm interested in using for this example is going to be our Russia Federation data set that we created way back when. And so I'm going to I know where it's at. It's in this. It's down here in this folder here. So I'm going to start clicking through this ICPSR 06499, and then it's here in the DSO 001. And here is my general social survey for the Russia Federation. Again, previously what we said is, let's open it, double click it, and voila, we have our data file. The problem with this, of course, is the fact that it doesn't have any record. We have no record retained of us opening this data file. And so we want to start to try to build a record of what we're doing, so if we ever have to do it again or show our work, we are able to without there being any sort of questions. And so we're going to close this out, and we're going to reopen that data file using a syntax. To open up a fresh syntax reader, you want to go to File, New, Syntax. Again, that's File, New, Syntax. And by clicking there, I get my new syntax editor to pop up. I'm going to go ahead and shove this thing over here just to have it on the left side of my screen, and I'm going to use the right side of my screen for my output as well as to just check in on other things. In order to pull a data file into SPSS, I need to tell SPSS where this data file is. The command that I want to use in order to get my file is just that, get file. And I'm now going to say where the file is located. And so I have a get file equals, and then I want to put in my single quotation mark. And now I'm going to go back to that folder where we just were, and I'm going to go into the address bar. I'm going to left click, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to copy that information. I'm going back over to my syntax file and I'm going to paste it. And again, what I'm pasting here is my pathway. And I say again because we talked about these pathways way back when. And so now we are pasting this pathway again. And so this is saying, SPSS, get my file from this pathway. But I need to do more than just tell it the pathway. I also need to tell it the data file name. And so I'm going to enter in another backslash. And then I'm going to go back over here to my window. And I'm going to get my variable, my data file name. And so I am going to, I'm simply clicking on this once, waiting, and then clicking on it twice. And that delayed double click is opening it up so that now all I have to do is copy it rather than trying to type all of this over again. And it's not that it's difficult to type this over again, but whenever you're having to manually enter something, you are always increasing drastically the probability of introducing an error inadvertently into our stuff. And so here I am copying it, and now I'm going to go back over to my syntax file, and I'm going to Control V and paste it. And so there you see that it's put in the data file name. And while this is great, I still need to add the last finishing touches, which is to give it the data file extension of .sav. And now that I've done that, I'm going to put another single quotation mark on the end of it. And what you'll see here is that I've got my full data file pathway, as well as the data file name, as well as the data file type, that .sav. What you'll notice here is that I still see the color red. The color red in SPSS, when it comes to a command, means you've got a problem with this command. And the problem with my command is that I don't have a period at the end of my command, at the end of this statement. And so I'm going to enter a period, and I'm going to press return. And when I press return, it takes me back to the far left. And what I see is that what used to be red, the get that used to be red, is now blue. Blue is good. And so now I know that this initial line of code is legitimate. Now, that's not to say it's going to work. If I have misspecified my pathway, or if I have given the wrong data set name, SPSS is not going to be able to fix my boo-boo. SPSS is going to do exactly what I tell it to do. But what the blue is telling me is that at least in terms of the specification of this step is correct. And so I can go ahead and I can just highlight pieces of the row of this line of code, and I can go ahead and press Control R to run it. And SPSS is running it, and you'll see that this output is just telling me, hey, I went and I got this data file. I'm going to pull the output over here so it can share the right side of my, I now got my right-left screen split going on. And if I go down here to the bottom where my SPSS data desktop icon is, or what is that thing? This is my taskbar. I can do this. My taskbar, I can click on the SPSS icon. I can left click on it, and I can see here that I've got a new data file. I'm going to click that, and here we go. Presto, our SPSS data file for the General Social Survey, Russia Federation 1992 file has been opened. And so we have used this SPSS syntax command in order to open up this data file. And now that we have the data file open, we will get into looking at and recoding this data file next.